The situation in Gaza is untenable. The war needs to end. The suffering must stop.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From the families of Israeli hostages protesting the latest ground offensive in Gaza to President Donald Trump's state visit to the United Kingdom. But first this morning, our correspondent in Tel Aviv gave us a look at Israel's intensifying assault on Gaza City. Israel's military is pushing further into Gaza City, and it says it's carried out over 150 air and artillery strikes on that city over the past 2 days. And it says it's targeting Hamas. But many in the international community have called for restraint given the massive civilian population there. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel needs to defend itself following Hamas's October 7th attack nearly 2 years ago.
And if there is one lesson we've learned from this war, it is that we want to be in a situation where we are not restricted. Israel must defend itself with its own forces and its own weapons. That's why we aim for security independence.
International correspondent Blake Sifton is in Tel Aviv for us. Good morning, Blake. What can you tell us about the latest on the ground in Gaza?
Good morning, Holly. The heavy bombardment of Gaza City is continuing, and some of these airstrikes and shelling that you mentioned has damaged the communications network in northern Gaza. We understand there's been damage to cell phone towers and cell phone signal, as well as the internet is down for many people, and that has made an already confusing, already frightening situation much, much worse. Also, the pace of which people are evacuating is picking up. The Israeli military says that 400,000 people have now evacuated Gaza City. That's out of a population of 1 million. The United Nations says that number is lower at 220,000, but still the numbers are increasing literally by the hour. Yesterday, along the only exit route from Gaza City to the south, the coastal road, it was completely choked with traffic, vehicle traffic and foot traffic. So today the Israeli military has opened a secondary evacuation route. This is the north-south highway. It will be available and open from today until Friday. Meanwhile, there's been chaotic scenes in Gaza City as people try to arrange transport for themselves and their families. We've talked about the cost of that. I understand that the prices are now around $2,000 for transport. Of course, that is beyond the means of many people at this stage of the war in Gaza City. If people aren't able to secure access to trucks, to bring their furniture, to bring their mattresses, they're essentially shoving what little they can of their possessions into smaller vehicles, onto carts pulled by donkeys, and in some cases simply putting it on their backs or carrying it in their arms and walking. And many of the people who are leaving Gaza City say that they don't think they will ever be allowed to return to their homes. Meanwhile, the family members of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza, they are terrified by this offensive. They are very worried that it will see their loved ones harmed. They are aware of reports that Hamas has moved the hostages, the living hostages, up from the tunnels from underground and are placing them in the way of advancing Israeli forces, essentially as human shields. And when this offensive began early on Tuesday morning, the family members of the hostages flocked to the home of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. They began protesting. They camped overnight, and they said they were going to remain there indefinitely in a protest encampment. However, that ended last night when police removed them one by one. However, they have said that they will be back with another protest tonight.
And Blake, what has the international response been to Israel's ground offensive up to this point?
There's been widespread and growing international condemnation of this offensive. Canada's foreign ministry called it horrific and said the government of Israel must adhere to international law. Earlier, the UK foreign secretary called it utterly reckless and appalling. The Dutch foreign minister said it leads to more casualties and the forced relocation of the Palestinian population. Their suffering is already indescribable. Even an Israeli ally, a strong Israeli ally like Germany, called it completely the wrong approach. And the Palestinian Authority implored the U.S. government to shoulder its responsibilities and not encourage the occupation to continue its aggression. But the United States seems to be completely backing up this offensive. When Secretary of State Marco Rubio was here in Israel on Monday, he appeared lockstep with the Netanyahu government. He said that Hamas should surrender, but it may require a military operation to eliminate them.
Reporting in Tel Aviv for us. Blake, thank you so much for that update. The Georgia Secretary of State who rebuffed President Trump's effort to overturn the results of the 2020 election in the state wants to be Georgia's next governor. Republican Brad Raffensperger says he's running for governor in 2026. He won re-election for Secretary of State in 2022, despite Trump's opposition. Current Governor Brian Kemp cannot run again due to term limits. Jerry Greenfield of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream is resigning. He's been with the company 47 years. He said the company's new owner, Unilever, has silenced its efforts to campaign on behalf of issues including voting rights, LGBTQ rights, and the rights of immigrants. In an open letter, he said he can no longer, in good conscience, remain an employee at the company. In a statement, Unilever thanked him but said it disagrees with his views that the company silenced his voice. Up next on Today As It Happened.
The U.S. tries to play catch-up in the mining, extraction, and processing of rare earth elements. But can they break China's grip on the supply? I'm Maya Rodriguez in eastern Idaho. We'll have that story coming up.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories. The Justice Department is suing Maine and Oregon over their refusal to turn over voter rolls. The agency's Civil Rights Division says it wants to make sure citizens have equal access to the ballot. The department claims federal law requires states to turn over the information. Voter rolls include dates of birth and partial Social Security numbers. But some election officials say that raises security concerns. The Constitution gives states primary authority to carry out elections. If you receive money from the federal government, you've only got a couple weeks left to make sure you can get it digitally. The Treasury Department plans to stop issuing paper checks for most payments on September 30th. That includes Social Security beneficiaries. More than 500,000 Social Security recipients need to choose another way to receive those benefits. And that can either be direct deposit or through a prepaid debit card known as Direct Express. Some exceptions will be made for people 90 or older or with mental impairments. If you've ever studied the periodic table back in science class at school, then you know dozens upon dozens of elements exist. Some are more commonly known than others. It's the lesser known ones that are now at the center of a global race to mine and extract them. And it could have huge national security implications right here in the U.S. Scripps News Global Affairs correspondent Maya Rodriguez is live in Washington now with those details. And Maya, what can you tell us about these elements and really what makes them so valuable?
Well, Holly, it's partly all in the name. They are called rare earth elements or rare earth minerals. What makes them rare is that they are hard to mine, extract, and process. That makes them very valuable and key materials in everything from smartphones to military fighter jets. As of now, China is the main supplier of these rare earth elements. And as we saw for ourselves, the U.S. is now trying to play catch up. Deep below the surface of the earth, in a Montana mine that once yielded gold and silver, as well as lead and zinc, lies the next frontier of globally coveted minerals. So how valuable is this?
Billions. It's worth billions.
Harvey Kay is the executive chairman of U.S. Critical Materials, a private rare earth deposit and processing company which owns this mine, known as Sheep Creek. The company provided Scripps News Group with this exclusive video showing deposits of what's known as rare earth elements.
There's strong evidence to believe that below the surface there may lie a continuous source, which we would call the mother lode.
Rare earth elements, or rare earth minerals, are a series of 17 elements seen mainly at the bottom of the periodic table, with names like lanthanum and promethium. They have unique magnetic and conductive properties, which are used for components in everyday tech like smartphones and in machines used in healthcare like MRIs.
They're like the cinnamon and nutmeg of society.
Aaron Noble is the department head of mining and minerals engineering at Virginia Tech. He uses the analogy of baking a cake to explain the value of rare earths.
The major components of the cake are the flour and the eggs and the milk. Really in society, that's your aluminum and your iron and your crushed stone, things we produce a lot of in high volumes that we're very good at. The rare earth elements instead, like I said, are the cinnamon and nutmeg. They're not a big portion of the volume, but they are all the spice that brings out all the flavor.
But perhaps more importantly, rare earth elements are key to the nation's defense, used in everything from fighter jets to Virginia-class submarines and even Tomahawk missiles.
You can't build a missile. You can't build advanced radars. To give you an idea, the F-35 fighter has 920 pounds of rare earths in it. A submarine has more than 5,000 pounds of rare earths in it.
But there's one big issue. The majority of rare earths are in the hands of one particular country.
China controls 85% of the rare earths in the world, and they control 95% of the processing ability.
That means the U.S. is dependent on China for the majority of its supply of rare earths.
If the Chinese are the source of rare earths, it creates a tremendous problem for our military.
Having a deposit of rare earth elements is one thing. Mining, extracting, and processing it are something else, and notoriously difficult with rare earth minerals. Enter Dr. Robert Fox.
We're problem solvers, and we develop technological solutions to advanced problems.
Dr. Fox and his team are with the Department of Energy's Idaho National Lab in Idaho Falls. They're working on finding ways to extract rare earths and get them mined in a more environmentally sustainable way.
The key challenge that we face in this nation is bringing sustainable mining back to the United States and reinforcing sustainable mining practices. And that's going to take new technology.
Some of the technology they are testing out in the lab includes finding ways to extract rare earth elements from discarded and recycled electronics.
To reduce the amount that we need to demand from a mine, you develop recycle recovery techniques for e-waste.
They're also finding and extracting rare earth minerals from more unusual waste, like the ash created when coal is burned.
What we are trying to do is get all the metals in here out. When you have a solid and a liquid, it's easy to separate. And then we can have a solution which leaves your rare earth elements in there.
In a nearby lab, Chloe Tolbert is trying to extract rare earths using an electric field.
Rather than just being able to do a small batch scale separation, we're able to just run this constantly and be able to collect different fractions of rare earths.
And some of the minerals they are using to experiment on rare earths in the lab come from the Sheep Creek mine in Montana, belonging to U.S. Critical Materials.
The reason for that is we have the highest grade of rare earths ever discovered in America.
But one that could potentially take years to access because of rules and regulations regarding mines. On average in the U.S., it takes about 15 to 29 years to get a mine operating. Harvey Kay says the U.S. can't afford to wait that long.
We now are in a new position whereby we need to come together with a balance of understanding the geopolitical need to have rare earths.
Do you see a future where the U.S. is 100% self-sufficient when it comes to these rare earths?
I see that future, but not for at least a period of time.
Time that may be as critical as these elements. Rare earth elements are so valuable, they've been part of the U.S. trade talks with China. Beijing is using those elements as leverage in negotiations over hefty tariffs imposed by the Trump administration earlier this year. The U.S. only has one operational rare earth mining and processing facility, which is located in Mountain Pass, California. And Holly, China has a stake in that mine, too.
Wow. First of all, my incredible reporting. Thank you for bringing that to us. Question for you. Has the Trump administration taken any steps to address this issue?
Yes, so realizing the risk that all of this poses to the U.S. defense and national security, last year the Department of Defense announced it was awarding more than $400 million to establish something known as a domestic rare earth elements supply chain. Also recently, President Trump issued an executive order to establish a fund that would provide a purchase guarantee to U.S. companies that are producing rare earths because it's a very expensive endeavor. There's also been a discussion about creating a strategic stockpile of rare earths that would be similar to what the U.S. has with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, 2 weeks until the government shuts down if Congress fails to extend federal funding. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed reported live from the Capitol as Democrats continued to sound the alarm on extending funding for Obamacare subsidies. So stay here with us for his reporting after the break. In 14 days, the federal government will be shut down if no consensus is reached on a government funding solution. Democrats are digging in over wanting to extend expanded ACA subsidies. Now, if that doesn't happen, it could cause massive price hikes on millions of Americans who use public health care exchanges. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live in Washington with details for us. And Nate, talk to us a little bit about government funding, because health insurance is actually playing a big part in whether the government shuts down or not.
It is playing a huge role. So far, Democrats have largely been demanding that Republicans adopt some sort of fix here to prevent people's premiums from skyrocketing at the end of the month. When people look to the insurance marketplaces, exchanges in their home states, they could be seeing vastly higher prices as a result of some of these Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare subsidies, expiring at the end of the year. That could create a lot of sticker shock. The prices could go up by an average of 75% for many people, up to 90% in rural areas, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. Again, that could make healthcare very unaffordable, could possibly see millions of Americans lose their health insurance over the course of the next year. So Democrats have kind of planted a flag here that they want to address that as part of this government funding discussion. They're reportedly going to release their own version of government funding bill later today that will include a permanent extension of those subsidies to keep healthcare more affordable for Americans. But some Democrats aren't buying it. They're saying that they're worried about the possibility of a shutdown. They don't want to negotiate in a shutdown, something that Democrats have said in the past. They folded previously last year when we were doing the discussions about these shutdown negotiations. Senator John Fetterman telling me, in fact, on Monday, that even though he wants these subsidies extended, he's not willing to play chicken with a government shutdown. Take a listen. If Republicans refuse to vote on Affordable Care Act subsidies, would you be open to using that?
I hope they agree, and I do think it is important, and I fully support that. That should be a standalone thing. Hey, let's bang that out. It's like, don't keep our government's operation as a hostage. It's always for that. I don't know how many votes we have. All I know is you have my vote. I refuse to weaponize shutting down our government. My colleagues might disagree. That's not a criticism. It's just what I happen to believe very strongly.
And look, the Democratic base has certainly gotten angry with Senator Fetterman before for being out of step with them on this issue and on other issues, but he might be kind of on an island on his own. So far, it's largely Republicans who are saying that they don't necessarily care if Affordable Care Act subsidies are in the overall bill. They're not necessarily negotiating on the merits of those subsidies, but just saying that if there's a government funding solution, it won't include those subsidies. Again, a lot of questions about whether any negotiation is possible. So far, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is saying that Republicans have been not willing to engage with him, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune defending Republicans' actions and making clear they want this government funding extension, but with no Obamacare Affordable Care Act subsidies. Take a listen.
There are conversations around this. I think there are things that we can do to make the program more efficient and ensure that the American people who benefit from it continue to benefit from it. But it was dramatically expanded under the last majority, Democrat majority in the Congress, and President Biden in the White House. And so now the expiration date is coming at the end of the year. But if we have a clean CR, gives us some time to do appropriation bills. Also allows some time to take a look at and see what the options are for addressing that issue as well.
And look, Holly, I'm glad you started us with that calendar right out of the gate. 14 days away before a possible government shutdown. I know we've talked about this ad nauseum for years, but again, here, this is a possible cliff that we could be facing, that there could be a government shutdown. Again, Democrats don't seem to be too thrilled about negotiating with President Donald Trump. At this point, Republicans keep threatening to go at it alone to try and pass some sort of government funding solution without Democrat support. The reality is they will need some Democrat buy-in to get it through the U.S. Senate. A lot of questions about whether those negotiations happen. The Senate expected to be off next week along with the House of Representatives. There are just days. I know we're saying 14 days until the government shuts down. Think of that as really more like 5 days up here on Capitol Hill. The House and the Senate are in until that government funding deadline hits, and we could be plunged into the depths of yet another government shutdown, Holly.
A long 5 days that'll be. I hope you're stocking up on sleep and snacks. Congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed. Thanks, Nate, so much. This is Today as It Happened. We'll be right back.
Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files? Yes or no?
Why don't you try spelling it out?
Yes
if you're
or
gonna mock
no, Director?
Use the alphabet.
Yes or no?
No? A, B, C,
Director,
D, E, F?
it sounds like you don't want to tell us.
You're watching Today as It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right in.
On August 25th, I could have stayed silent, agreed to the demands, and no one would have known. What the public would have seen were scientists dismissed without cause and vaccine protections quietly eroded, all under the authority of a Senate-confirmed director with unimpeachable credentials. I could have kept the office, the title, but I would have lost the one thing that cannot be replaced, my integrity.
The former director of the CDC just finished testifying before the Senate Health Committee. Dr. Susan Monarez talking about how RFK Jr. pressured her to endorse new vaccine recommendations without seeing any scientific evidence. Scripps News congressional correspondent Stephanie Liebergen was inside today's hearing. She joins us now with the details. And Steph, let's just begin with a basic question. Why did Dr. Monarez say she was fired?
Hey, Adele, good afternoon. Well, she says there were really kind of two reasons she was fired. One, she says that Secretary Kennedy asked her to dismiss longtime CDC scientists and experts. That is something that Secretary Kennedy confirmed in his hearing in front of the Senate Finance Committee a few weeks ago. But this is where their versions of why she was fired differ. She says she was asked to commit to approving upcoming vaccine changes from the key vaccine panel in September. She says that Secretary Kennedy wanted her to approve those vaccine changes without getting any details and before the changes had even been recommended. That is certainly different from what Secretary Kennedy had to say. That's something that he rejected, saying that he didn't ask her to do when he testified before the Senate Finance Committee. But these were, kind of the two very clear reasons. I want you to listen to Dr. Monarez herself kind of spelling out why she was let go.
Secretary Kennedy told me he could not trust me. I had refused to commit to approving vaccine recommendations without evidence, fire career officials without cause, or resign, and I had shared my concerns with this committee. I told the secretary that if he believed he could not trust me, he could fire me.
Now, Monarez says that she spoke with the committee. She spoke with the committee chair, Senator Cassidy, when these concerns bubbled up after conversations with Secretary Kennedy. And she says that when that got back to the secretary, Senator Cassidy said in the hearing today that he reached out to the White House, that he reached out to HHS after his conversation with Dr. Monarez. And when that information got trickled back to her at the CDC, the Secretary Kennedy was upset with her for talking to senators. And according to her, he instructed her to not talk to members of the Senate anymore, which she viewed as a violation of something she promised to do when she went through the confirmation process. She also says that when she told the Secretary that she would not be a rubber stamp for upcoming vaccine recommendation changes to the childhood vaccine schedule, that she described Secretary Kennedy as being very upset, saying that sometimes it was hard to follow his logic and when he was complaining, and that he said that CDC employees didn't care that they were killing children. A comment that also came up in the Senate Finance Committee a couple weeks ago, something that Secretary Kennedy rejected saying. So there are certainly two different versions of events here. There's the one we got from the Secretary a couple weeks ago, and then of course there's the version we got today from Susan Monarez.
Stephanie, this is a story that will have a direct effect on people. What can you tell us about the upcoming, what is called the ACIP meeting, and will there be any changes to vaccines?
Well, based on what we heard from Susan Monarez in the hearing today, it sounds like changes are expected in the meeting that's happening over the next couple days. Based on the conversations, as she laid it out, she said Secretary Kennedy expected changes to the childhood vaccine schedule to come up in this September meeting. But the two main vaccines, at least the ones that we've heard the most about in both the Finance Committee hearing and in this one, it's the COVID vaccine and the hepatitis B vaccine that seem to be getting the most attention about possible changes. But of course, children get vaccines for polio, for the measles, for the chickenpox, a large variety, and they're both Dr. Monarez and the former chief medical officer of the CDC, Dr. Oury, who was testifying alongside her, they both expressed serious concerns about childhood vaccines being rolled back in any way. I want you to listen to some of the concerns that Dr. Oury explained.
I served 10 years at CDC under 6 directors and 4 administrations. In each case, priorities shifted, but decisions were grounded in evidence, transparency, and consultation with the world's best scientists. That has changed. I resigned because CDC leaders were reduced to rubber stamps, supporting policies not based in science and putting American lives at risk. Secretary Kennedy censored CDC science, politicized its processes, and stripped leaders of independence. I could not, in good conscience, remain under those conditions.
Now, we were able to catch up with the chairman of the Senate Health Committee, Senator Cassidy, after the hearing today, and he was asked if that vaccine panel does recommend changes to the child vaccine schedule later this week, does he think the Americans can trust that? And he flatly said no. He then went on to explain some of the statistics about the hepatitis B vaccine and the impact that it has had in reducing hepatitis B, especially among babies and children, and that can have a lifelong impact. The Vaccine Committee meeting later this week, hepatitis B and COVID are among the vaccines that are on the agenda for the panel to consider. So it certainly seems like changes could be on the way, and any changes that are recommended by that vaccine panel would need to be approved by the CDC director, and there's an acting director currently in that position, no new formal nominee for who will replace Susan Monarez from President Trump or from Secretary Kennedy yet, Del.
Yeah, and Senator Cassidy is a practicing physician. Scripps News correspondent Stephanie Liebergen for us on Capitol Hill. Stephanie, thank you very much. The families of the hostages still being held by Hamas are speaking out, staging almost daily protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and urging for their loved ones' release. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live with us from New York City. And Alex, what are the families saying about this most recent offensive into Gaza?
Well, they're upset, they're concerned, they're frustrated about the safety of their loved ones, including the nearly 24 hostages who are thought to be alive. They are worried for their safety amidst news that they might have been brought above ground as the IDF goes into Gaza City. They are also frustrated. They tell me that they feel like they need to go to the Trump administration to have their voices heard. Hostage families are taking their fight to the Prime Minister's doorstep, protesting overnight outside of his home, demanding an end to the war, the IDF operation in Gaza City, and begging him to focus on bringing the hostages home. 50 hostages are remaining. Less than 24 are believed to be alive. The Hostage Families Forum says a significant number of living hostages are believed to be held in Gaza City, where the IDF is expanding its footprint. The group says the Prime Minister is sacrificing them on the altar of political considerations. Both current and former IDF officials have advised against the operation. Maccabee Mayer, the aunt of 28-year-old twins Ziv and Gali Berman being held, questioned Netanyahu's priorities.
אז מה עובר על גלי וזיוי כשהבית שלי במרחק שעה? רעד. מה אתה עושה לעזאזל? לאן אתה מוביל אותנו? לאיזה גיהנום אתה מוביל את העם הנפלא הזה? אתם לא ראויים לעם הזה, אתם לא ראויים לעם הזה.
And Shay Dickman, cousin of Carmel Gott, who was executed by Hamas along with 5 others, including American Hirsch Goldberg Poland last summer, reminded the Prime Minister that they were killed as the IDF intensified its pressure.
אבל ראש הממשלה, אז בחרתם במלחמה. כי אם עוד לא הבנת, ראש הממשלה, מחבלי חמאס מחזיקים באזרחים שאתה אחראי להם.
Former hostages, including Noah Argamani, are speaking out too. The 27-year-old was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival and, in a dramatic video, separated from her boyfriend Avinatan Or, who is still considered a living hostage. She wrote on X that she cannot breathe watching the fighting in Gaza City. I saw my friend die before my eyes in captivity, she wrote, and I cannot accept that it should happen to anyone else ever again. Hostage families also protested outside of other officials' homes, too. The IDF says it's making every effort to avoid targeting certain areas where it believes hostages are being held. And the protesting continues, even though for a point the protesters were clear tonight. They are making sure that they are outside of Netanyahu's home when he is home. They originally had a march plan for this evening, but upon finding out that he was back around 6 p.m. local time, they went back to his house. They are not planning to leave, and they are asking others in the public, people who seemingly are not as affected, to come out and support them.
Alex, as you know, all politics is local. So what does this criticism of Netanyahu mean for President Trump?
You know, it puts a lot of pressure on President Trump. We've seen the hostages who have been released in the recent deals thanking President Trump. We've seen not only hostage families from the United States going to President Trump, but many that I've spoken to feel like the administration is really their only avenue. But there's a lot of pressure on Trump that there hasn't been more progress as of late. And of course, with the strike in Doha, that puts pressure on the administration. The president speaking up about that, saying that Qatar has been a good friend to the United States. And of course, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, was in Jerusalem earlier this week saying that Israel has the United States' full support in terms of going after Hamas, and the president backing that up by warning Hamas not to use the hostages as human shields. But you can see in protests in Tel Aviv at Hostage Square, there are often banners referencing President Trump, asking him to be the one to make this deal rather than their own government.
Our national correspondent Alex Miller live for us in New York City. Alex, thank you very much.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
The Federal Reserve has finally lowered interest rates. I'm Katie Tubman. Coming up, what this change could mean for first-time homebuyers.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
While the unemployment rate remains low, it has edged up. Job gains have slowed, and downside risks to employment have risen. At the same time, inflation has risen recently and remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals, and in light of the shift in the balance of risks, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to lower our policy interest rate by a 0.25 percentage point.
The Fed rate cut is something President Trump has been pushing for since the start of his second term. It could help mortgage rates, but lots of Americans say that doesn't matter because homes are just too darn expensive. Scripps News national correspondent Katia Tubman is live for us in New York. And Katia, is the American dream more attainable today than it was before the Fed rate cut?
Well, that is the question right now, Del. Well, we know right now that interest rates have finally dropped, but potential home buyers are facing major and multiple obstacles to obtaining the American dream of home ownership, and that may be keeping it out of reach. Buying a home is becoming increasingly difficult to achieve.
I'll be renting for the rest of my life. All you can do is save, 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 and even then it may not be enough.
That reality reflected in numbers released Wednesday by the Census Bureau, which shows a decrease in privately owned building permits, housing starts, and housing completions last month compared to August 2024. Jessica Lautz is a deputy chief economist at the National Association of Realtors.
The typical cost of a home for both new homes and for existing homes is above $400,000 nationwide. That being said, in some areas of the country, the median cost for an existing property actually tops $2 million.
First-time home buyers make up only 24% of all purchases, and they're getting older. The median age for a first-time home buyer is now 38, an all-time high, and a stark contrast to the 1980s, where first-time homeowners were typically in their 20s.
First-time homebuyers have headwinds within the housing market, such as housing affordability and limited affordable housing inventory. But we also know that there's headwinds outside of that housing market. So saving for a down payment when you're paying higher rent and student loan debt and childcare costs make it very hard for a young adult.
But there may be some relief on the way, with the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates by 1/4 percentage point, the first decrease since December 2024.
And that change in mortgage interest rates could help some home buyers into the market. If we look at the cost of the mortgage, it really does mean a difference of $148 per month for the typical price of a home. So that could be a game changer for some buyers.
Hopefully enough of a savings to help some struggling to achieve the American dream.
Coming up on Today as It Happened. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is outside Windsor Castle for President Donald Trump's visit with the royal family. Stay with us here for more of the pageantry and the politics across the pond after the break. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
The President and the First Lady and other top officials are attending that state banquet hosted by King Charles and the rest of the royal family. The high-profile banquet capping off a day of pomp and circumstance. The UK, as you know, is America's closest ally, and it comes as the two nations highlight their historic ties and pursue new tech initiatives. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull traveling with the president. She's at Windsor Castle. And Haley, quite the spectacle. The Brits putting on quite the show for the president. So what stood out?
Yeah, Del, President Donald Trump and King Charles III both highlighting the historic bonds between the United States and the UK during a historic second state visit for President Trump, as leaders are, as you said, focusing on trade and technology in the backdrop. Both leaders giving toasts tonight at that elaborate state dinner, the president calling the visit one of the highest honors of his life after a day of royal pageantry alongside the royal family. It is one that included a carriage procession, a viewing of the guard, a military flyover, a military ceremony that was the first for a state visit, a viewing of royal artifacts highlighting the relationship between the countries, to name a few of the ongoings today leading up to the dinner, in which both leaders underscored the anniversary, the 250th anniversary for the U.S. next year. The president calling the kinship between the countries, quote, priceless and also irreplaceable, as he credited the British for the foundations of free speech, individual rights and liberty, while also at the same time touting the U.S. as what he has frequently called the, quote, hottest country in the world. But what was also notable, Del, was in addition to the compliments that the king played to President Trump, including nods to golf in his remarks. He also highlighted trade relations, defense cooperation, climate, and efforts to end global conflict, including in Ukraine. Listen.
Mr. President, as we approach the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence next year, it is remarkable to think just how far we have come. I cannot help but wonder what our forebears from 1776 would make of this friendship today.
Eternal, it's irreplaceable and unbreakable, and we are, as a country, as you know, doing unbelievably well. We had a very sick country 1 year ago, and today, I believe we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. In fact, nobody's even questioning it, but we owe so much of that to you and the footing that you gave us when we started. Together, we've done more good for humanity than any two countries in all of history.
And Del, the day of pomp and pageantry leads into a more politically focused day tomorrow when President Trump meets with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who initially passed along the invitation to Trump during his visit to the White House earlier this year. And it comes as the UK has navigated President Trump's new trade policies in this second administration. The president, as he left the White House, indicated that the British are looking to refine their trade deal. And leading up to this and in the backdrop of this, we have seen the UK announce a number of new partnerships, including a new technology pact between the countries spanning the AI, quantum, and nuclear spaces with investments of more than $40 billion, nuclear cooperation and deals, and U.S. officials also adding that they expect advancements on defense technology cooperation. Additionally, Del, the leaders are expected to meet with business leaders tomorrow as well. And that's what makes it notable that some of the dinner guests tonight included tech CEOs, including from Apple, Microsoft, OpenAI, NVIDIA, to name a few, alongside Rupert Murdoch and a U.S. Masters winning golfer.
Other than the number of plates and silverware that you have to sort of go through just to get to the main course, what stood out to you about tonight's proceedings?
Well, Del, in addition to the toasts that were notable in the exchange of compliments, but some of the subtleties in that speech nodding to the history between the countries, as you mentioned, going back to almost 250 years. There were also particular touches paid attention to in the planning of this dinner, and we received a preview of it, of the ornate, really, table setting that was laid out. We were told it's equivalent to the banquet table, the equivalent of 2.7 Marine Ones end to end, taking a week to put together. Breaking down the numbers, 130 candles, more than 1,400 pieces of cutlery, and 160 guests.
News White House correspondent Haley Bull, live on the scene for us in the UK. Haley, as always, we thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us this evening for Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have a great Wednesday night.